Later. Oh, perfect. So thank you everyone for being here. Today we have the pleasure of introducing you to Michael Burdick on the topic of all the options are on the table. But before we jump into that, I'd just like to give you a brief overview what this space is for and what this space is not for. This space was founded on the principles of unconditional love and acceptance, meaning that you're free to come as you are. It's a space of non-judgment. It's a space where your expressions are accepted. Really, the goal is to really help guide all of us to our authentic expressions, which I feel are innocent, beautiful, and love. I feel like sometimes we are just conditioned in such a way by society, our families, to be, or to go, I should say, against our true nature. And so we're conflicted, and sometimes we live with a lot of heaviness. And so really this space is to unload the heaviness, to become light. And so for that, we share many perspectives, like Michael. Next week, we'll have another guest speaker, and so on and so forth. We have many guest speakers because everybody has had different life experiences, and so they bring different awareness. But like for me, I grew up with a very small perspective of life. And all of a sudden, my perspective started widening. And as I let go of all the stories that composed this character that was Noe and its previous iteration, then I was able to become something different, more authentic to what's here in the heart. And so there's no way to be. And I truly believe that. There's 9 billion people on this planet and all is well. Every single expression, nobody wakes up and says, I want to be a jerk. I want to be a bad person. I feel like, um, we're just simply the products of our environment. And there's so much that could be said. I could talk for days about that, but this is the space to unload and to look within and to get perspective and awareness and to be able to become lighter and to feel better. Because when we're lighter and we're authentic, then we're happier, we're more at peace. And who doesn't want that? I didn't even know that I wanted that. And then I started meditating, and long story short, here I am now. And so I appreciate what I've learned along the way. And so that's why we're doing this. So Michael, I'm just gonna read. He put together such a good description, which I mean it's a little well, I'll just read it and you'll see. But it's perfect. So becoming the omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient self is a eternal path through allowing all fractal aspects of our being, all beliefs, perceptions, and all emotional resonances to come together as one allows our limitless nature to evolve and be free. Through that sovereign essence that embodies the wisdom of each part of our being, we no longer choose to move forward by leaving pieces of self behind. We choose to manifest our next moment from the alchemy of all that has been, currently is, and what we desire it to be. Whole and complete in our decisions, we no longer require attachments, dependencies, or means of escape. We then thrive in our true nature as a result of the purest and total combination of our limitless potential, which I feel is kind of like what I described, but in a different way. He described it in a different way. Let's go back to our true essence, right? Let's not be fractalized. Like I have to be this way because my parents, because my spouse. No, let's just be our true nature. And that's what I think what Michael's telling us, how to get back to that and how that benefits us. Am I right, Michael? Something like
100%,
that?
brother. 100%. So you actually just touched on where I would love to start. Um,
Oh,
oh, go ahead, brother. Go
oh,
ahead.
my bad, my bad. So before we get started, I always like to lead off with just a short grounding meditation because I don't know about everyone. I'm carrying stuff from the day, and I'm sure you're carrying stuff from the workday, and this is just a place to arrive. Really, I want to like commend everyone, and myself as well, because like we're buying out the time for ourselves, right? An investment in our own mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health. When we neglect that, then we suffer in so many ways. So this is a short meditation, super short. If you're driving, do not close your eyes. But if you're in a safe space where you can, I invite you to close your eyes briefly and breathe in. Hold it and embrace yourself and say, I love you. And release the breath. Now take a deep breath. Hold it and say, I accept you. and release the breath. Now take another deep breath. Hold it. And say, I'm doing the best I can. Everyone is. And release the breath. I invite you to open your eyes. And let's arrive here now. There's nowhere to go, nothing to do. You let all that stuff to the side. It's going to get done eventually. We can just be present and invest in our mental health. Michael, floor is yours.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for that as well. I appreciate that. So yeah, Noe just brought up being our pure essence and our pure presence. And he also brought up a lot of other things around like societal conditioning, maybe ancestral conditioning, maybe being products of our environment. And what I'm hoping to convey today is the idea that there is no part of you that is any less powerful than any other part. It is just the relationship to those parts that maybe is causing the imbalances. And when we can allow ourselves to bring all of the parts together and mature together, then what happens is that our presence is basically an amalgam or maybe a multiple additions coming together. So I'll give you a simple example. If I'm driving down the road and then someone decides to come in front of me with a minimal amount of space, maybe what we call getting cut off, and my initial response unconsciously is to just get frustrated at that person. That's just my initial response. Now, if I didn't consciously choose to be frustrated at them, that's just what happens. It's an impetus, it's a reaction rather than a response. Then that means that it's just coming up because it wants to be seen. That frustration is coming out. Now, is it good to be frustrated at that person? Is it bad to be frustrated at that person? That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm just saying that it's showing up. Frustration in and of its essence is coming forward. Now, I can either choose to continue to be frustrated at that person, continue to project it outside of me, or what I can do is recognize, wait a second, part of me is very frustrated at this person. Why? Maybe it's that I feel unsafe. Maybe it's that I feel all of these feelings start to come forward. And a lot of the time, what can happen based on our societal conditioning, maybe our ancestral stuff, is that I instantly tell myself, oh, no, it's not okay to be frustrated at that person. Like Noe just said, they're doing the best they can. So I diminish my frustration. I literally say it shouldn't be happening, but yet I was already feeling it. It was already there. And have I really actually changed the path of that frustration at all? No. All I've done is it showed up. And then much like probably what happened when I was a kid, maybe frustrated at something and my teacher told me that's not okay. Or my dad was like, you can't be frustrated at those things. There's more important stuff to worry about. Whatever the belief patterns are around it, all I've done is just had the frustration show up and then instantly put it back in the shadow. It's going to come back again. And it might come back at somebody else driving. It might come back at a work problem. It might come back at my spouse. It doesn't matter. It's just going to come back again because I haven't given it a conscious channel to move into. I haven't given it a proper orientation so that it can show up. And a lot of these times, because these younger version of ourselves have formed these belief patterns around this frustration, not only in to be frustrated at that person, but then also my reaction to it. Both of those are belief patterns. Oh, I should be frustrated when people put me in danger. And I should then also, based on my maybe new spiritual growth or whatever I'm doing with my life, it's not okay to be mad at people. So those are both belief patterns. But in and of itself, if we look at the core, what happened is that there was a part of myself showing up. And if we can take ourselves back from, wait, instead of I can't be frustrated, it's just an option on the table. That's really all it is. It's an option. Right now, it might feel really polarized. It might be really strong. Now, why? That's a really good question as to why those things show up. If it's all options on the table, then why is this thing so strong? And that happens to all of us, right? Things just kind of take us over and we're instantly sucked into them. Well, if we think about it for the vast amount of time, just like I said, that frustration has shown up many times and then been put back in the shadow. So it just gets larger and larger and larger until we get sucked into it and we realize, wait a second, I don't really want to be frustrated like this anymore. And a lot of the times in our lives, right, we can all agree that things build up like that until we're like, man, I've seen this pattern so many times. Why didn't I just deal with this before? And based on the way that I have worked with myself and I've worked with others, really what I can understand is that that is a part of ourselves that has not matured to understand that it does not have to respond that way. It does not have to react that way. Now we can sit here and we can be like, okay, well then I'm going to focus on my frustrations. I'm going to focus on my anger. And then we dive all of our focus into that one emotion. But then again, that's just one part of us. And so let's take this into consideration. Let's take the exact same situation. I get cut off, and then all of a sudden I'm frustrated. And I'm like, thank you, frustration. What am I frustrated about? And I give it maybe 10 seconds of my time. But instead of getting rid of it, and instead of trying to process it, what I do is I just keep it around. And I say, okay, thank you, frustration. Thank you for being part of my authentic experience. Thank you for being part of me. I love you. I accept you. You're doing the best you can, just like Noe's meditation, right? I love you. I accept you. You're doing the best you can. That seriously, that part of yourself, that's what it knows. If it knew any better, it wouldn't be reacting that way. So you might as well just give yourself the space. Okay, this is how I'm reacting to this. Perfect. Now, with all options on the table, then I want to say, okay, frustration, you stay here with us. What's another way to respond to this person? Maybe I give them the space. Hey, they're doing the best they can. Maybe they're needing to get home quick because someone's in trouble. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they're not paying attention. Maybe they're distracted by something else. We start giving them the space and the compassion, not out of unvalidation of our frustrations. See how the frustration's right there? I'm not saying you need to get away from me. I'm not saying you're not okay to be around. I'm actually saying, hey, can you be around with me as we go into these other options? Now, what happens is as you explore more options and you keep bringing those parts with you together, the polarization or the overtaking effect that we spoke of earlier that the frustration might have actually starts to diminish purely because you and more parts of you are giving space to each other. You are building up the presence of yourself based on all of the resonances, not just frustration, not just fear, not just joy either, not just bliss, all of these parts coming together. Now, if that frustration shows up and it's really, really strong and it hasn't had the chance to really mature yet, then you might have all these parts of yourself and you're like, okay, what are we going to choose to do? Now, I mean, in this situation, when you're driving, it's like you're probably just going to choose to move along, right? But let's take on to something more complex. What if this is a situation with your parents? You're having conflict with your parents and you're like, okay, well, what am I going to choose to do? Well, instead of me saying, I'm going to be the patient version of myself. Actually, let's say I'm frustrated with my parents. Let's just move frustration over. If I'm frustrated with my parents, instead of choosing to do something without the frustration, instead of me choosing to make a decision as if it's better to do it this other way, I have to give frustration a channel to work with being patient. I have to give frustration a channel to work with being maybe more compassionate with my parents. So then how do you do that, Michael? Well, actually, friends, I would tell you right now that in all of the work I've done over the many years with myself, I think that that comes because of the community and the resonance that is formed when those parts of yourself feel safe and vulnerable enough to be around. And just like Noe mentioned earlier, it's kind of a meditation. You're sitting with each of these parts of yourself. And as they start to balance each other out and have the space to not be better or worse than anything else, right? Let's say you're so mad that you're thinking about being violent. Well, instead of you telling yourself, oh, I'm a terrible person for having thoughts of violence or feeling violent at any level, violence in and of itself is a very powerful energy. Are you going to choose to do that? Most likely not. But instead of you shrouding it back into the depths of your being, instead of you being like, it's not okay to be that way, you already are that way. If it's showing up, it's already happening. So then we give those parts of ourselves the space to work together. Okay, you know what? Violence, what would you choose to do? Whatever violence says. Frustration, what would you choose to do? Whatever frustration says. Confidence, patience, all of the joy, what would you choose to do? Little versions of myself, what would you choose to do? You can go to any part of yourself, any of those feelings. And it may sound a little wonky, but you can talk to those parts of yourself. They're already speaking to you through some way, shape, or form. If you learn how to start to speak to those parts, those fractals, as what Noe mentioned earlier, instead of it being so fractal out, you bring it into center. And if each of those parts are all at the conference table, right? No one has a higher chair. No one's better than anyone else. You're not telling yourself that the lower, denser emotional resonances of yourself are weak or they're bad. And you're not telling yourself that the higher ones are the ones that you have to be and that you're striving. The channeling is that if you think about it, those dense energies at the bottom of all of the resonance waves, let's talk about fear, guilt, sorrow, all the really low density ones, they are dense, they are compacted energy. They're like batteries. They're literally sitting there as dense pits of energy waiting for you to channel them into something of a higher resonance, which is, much more flowy and much more open. The same thing we want to do is we want to take those higher energies and we want to make them dense, but we don't want to turn them into maybe the sorrow or the other things. So what does that density look like? That's our bodies. That's our physical environment. That's our relationship to the things around us. That's our food. That's how we draw those higher essences in, is we channel them in. But we also have to give a channel to the upper or the lower resonances into the upper. So let's say I'm working with my family and I'm really, really mad at my dad, right? So I call my dad. And before I call my dad, I'm like, you know what? All of this angriness, I'm going to bring it here with me. And notice, instead of that part controlling the action, it's just, I'm going to call my dad because I'm pissed at him. I'm going to be mad. He's going to know I'm mad at him. So then I'm sitting there railing on him on the phone. That is literally my anger controlling. That's my anger being projected. If I bring my anger next to me, with me, part of my center, it's with me. It's not guiding. It's just part of the expression. Then I don't have to tell my dad I'm angry. I'm already there. If it starts to show itself in some way, shape, or form, hey, dad, I'm feeling a little upset because of this action. Well, that's okay. That's me taking ownership of my feelings, but it's not having to project itself. Why? Because you have already given it the space. You have already given it the option. What would you choose to do, anger? Well, I tell my dad to F off. I'm done with him. That's what anger might be saying. But if you can still talk to whoever that is, if I'm talking to my dad and I give it the anger and it's still having the space to speak because it's there with me, well, it's an option on the table. Now, as this starts to mature and then anger doesn't feel like it just has to respond to my dad, then what's the next level for anger? Well, the next level for anger is that it gets to work with the other parts of myself as a matured aspect of my being to make decisions together. So then if you notice, like what Noe, I'm sure, Noe, let me ask you a question. It's like you said earlier, you said, I used to be very limited in my perspectives, right? But then I'm opening my perspectives. Do you see how he spoke about how the old became the new? That's that. Noe, does that feel like a channel? Just even that process, does that feel like when you opened it, you even made like an opening with your hands as if it's a channel opening up?
Right, and it's not like you do it once and that's it. This is not what being human
Exactly.
is about. It's like evolution or de-evolution, and anyone is okay. We can say,
Exactly.
one is better than another, but in reality, from this higher perspective of being, it's all one thing being expressed in an infinite variety of ways. And it's simply a perspective. But yes, you're right. We're either channeling up, channeling down, and for the lack of better words, using language, right? But at the end of the day, it's still all one energy being expressed.
Totally. Totally. Exactly. And so that channel, that essence of him opening up that space where the old perspectives, the old limitations that caused the I'm going to only focus this much, right? Those perspectives, open up, as we both know. But how did they open up? Well, no, he kept going towards them. He kept giving them space. Well, this is my current perspective. And then I open it up and I give it this perspective. Now, here's the thing. We're all talking about the same thing here. The one thing I want to add into that is that, no, you did mention something earlier where you were like, I had to let those things go. This has been a kind of a wild card for my own being, so I'm sharing it. But like what I've done, instead of letting those parts of myself be like the old parts, I actually re-invite them in, as if I was going to 100% give them the option to go back to the old. So even the completely inauthentic versions of myself that I had when I was younger, because I was hiding from traumas from my childhood, even those versions of me, I invite them to come forward, and they don't show up anymore as wanting to be inauthentic. They show up as themselves, and then they work with the rest of the community of my evolved perspectives to actually move forward and mature themselves even more. They don't have to express as that inauthenticity through me. They get to be themselves still, though. And
I
that's
love
the
that.
thing. And so, dude, it's been a wild card for my being, because what it does is that it shows me my sovereign power of choice. I can have the part of myself around that I feel like completely destroyed my life through all of the perspectives of hiding from its own truth. I could bring that part of me, hold it with the most love and compassion, and have it there as if it was going, like it's 100% okay for me to actually completely reignite all of its belief patterns, for me to 100% choose to do all of those things. Am I going to make that choice? No, because I've already learned all the wisdom of those choices. It doesn't mean that I need to do it again, but giving those parts of myself the fruit that you could do it again. Because a lot of the times, and this is what I was saying in the short description, is that in order for us to get away from dependencies or modes of escape or attachments, well, a lot of the times, those parts of ourselves that feel so strong that we have to hide from them, that we can't have them around, like those parts that we wouldn't share with our closest people because we don't feel that they're okay to be around with, those parts need the most space, friends. Those parts require the most space because they are the densest. And those vulnerable parts of ourselves, actually, if we can continue to bring them around, and again, you might be like, well, Michael, how is that not affecting your current choice? Like, how is it not making it? It's because my relationship to that part of myself has changed. The channel of its energy has changed. It has matured. So the way that I used to bring them around when I was a kid is that it would overdominate me. I would lie to myself. I'd lie to my family. I'd lie to my friends. I didn't even know who I really was because I was hiding from some really dense trauma. And so, like, I literally locked the truth away so it was easier to lie because I didn't have the foundation of the truth. Now I can bring that version of myself, that super manipulative version of myself, because that's what I had to learn how to do, is become manipulative. I had to learn how to do that because it didn't have a foundation of truth. So I bring that part of myself around. Its channel is out of gratitude. Thank you so much for showing me the shadow aspect of myself that could hide from the truth so vastly. Thank you. You have taught me how to now expand into my truth because of all of that constriction and restriction around it. Thank you so much. And so, does that part of myself, when it shows up, does it feel the need to control my environment anymore? Does it feel the need to be the over dominating force? No, because it has the space, it has the gratitude, it has the process that it's been with. It's had the amount of times, like Noe just said, this is not a one and done. This is constantly bringing those versions of yourself back in. And eventually, what happens is that they no longer feel the need to express themselves because you're already giving them the space to express. So then the next level of what I would call all options on the table is that if we have one conference table with all the parts of ourselves, then let's make another table right in the center. And what they do is that if every part of myself comes together, the omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient part of myself come together and they make a decision as a whole, that sounds like my intuition. That sounds like my amalgam of my whole being coming together to make the best decision for all parts to move forward. And let me make this kind of a simple example. Let's say on one side of the table, we got fear, And on the other side of the table, we got confidence. And maybe my confidence is really, really low. And on the other side, the table of the fear is really, really strong, right? Well, if I'm just choosing the confidence, then maybe what it feels like for me is like, I can't feel fear at all. I'm going to push it away and I'm going to choose confidence. And a lot of the times what happens is we get burned out really quickly because that's past the threshold of what confidence would choose with fear, not what confidence would choose without fear. It's what confidence can choose in the face of being with the fear. So keeping them both around. So it's like, okay, fear's over here, and fear's like, well, we could stop the confidence entirely. And the confidence is like, I can barely take one step. And you're like, okay, well, what's the middle ground between those two? Well, like I said earlier, friends, how do we do that, Michael? How do we do all this? It's a conversation internally, friends. It's a healing conversation internally. Those parts of yourself have to come together and make an agreement of how to move forward so that the fear isn't over dominating the confidence and the confidence isn't under dominated by the fear. They're working together and I can't tell you how to do that. I can't even say that there's any person on this planet besides you and your heart space that would allow both of those parts to come together, balance out, and make a decision as best as they can in that moment. That space is a sacred space that I feel is only cultivated by a person sitting with the parts of themselves and feeling that they need nothing else outside of them besides the space that they can make, the community that they can make inside of themselves with each of those parts. That's not reliant on anybody else, friends. It doesn't work with everybody. Like it's even hard to describe this. But what I can say is that the space that's cultivated is free. You can do it at any time in any action too. You could do it at literally doing anything. You're about to brush your teeth. Okay, well, maybe you're about to brush your teeth and you're anxious because you're running a little late for work. And you're like, okay, well, anxious is here. Thanks, anxiety. What are we anxious about? Oh, well, I might get yelled at about my boss. Cool. All right, that's enough of anxiety for right now. Thank you. You still feel you. I'm right here with you. What else do I got? Oh, I'm kind of enjoying this little bit of bop I got going. Maybe I'm enjoying myself a little bit while I'm brushing my teeth. So you bring in the enjoyment, and then you're like, you know what? I'm gonna have some orange juice after this because I'm feeling crazy. I'm kidding, but my point is that the options, the more options you bring onto the table without any option getting diminished in its power, that's you guys being able to make a completely sovereign free will choice at any moment and do anything you want in fully acceptance of yourself. That's because those options are there. A free will choice, in my personal opinion, and I mean, someone could tell me I'm wrong, but a pure free will choice, I feel like you have to be at the complete center of that resonance wave of your whole being. You have to be at the exact center. In order for it to be totally free, it has to be non-polarized at any level. It has to be fully centered. So for me, I've been working to find that center in all the ways I can. And the ways that I found it is coming back to invite all of the polarized parts of myself into one centered location, keeping all of their options on the table as best as I can. Doesn't mean it's perfected at the beginning. Trust me, this has taken many months of work. But bringing them all as I can, as equally as possible. And it doesn't mean that I'm sitting there in this mental process all the time. I'm just doing it as much as I can, right? And a lot of the times what starts to happen is that you're in the center of the conference room and there's not really any feeling at all. This is actually what I feel the sages and the gurus and the ancients talk about is getting to a place where you don't feel anything because you're feeling everything. To me, that feels like all parts of myself are sitting at a conference table with all the options present and being able to choose any of them from a space that it's all good. It's all okay. You can do whatever you want. But in my personal opinion, the consciousness evolves when we start to allow those parts, instead of us making a decision as one chair at the table, it's what does the whole table have to say as a whole. And here's the thing, when you allow, at least for me, and when I've offered this to anybody else, I've gotten the same consistent message, and I'll share it with you guys. And this came from me as well. A lot of the times that center table option feels so wonky, even if it makes sense. So like it might be all the options of yourselves come together and you're like, well, I'm not going to talk to my dad for a couple days. And you're like, that makes sense. because I'm giving myself space and, got to give my dad some time to cool down and yada, yada, yada. You say all these things that make sense, but the feeling of it feels so wonky. And I can just tell you guys that imagine a lot of us have been taking, at least, and this was my process too at the beginning. A lot of me was like, when I first even started my spiritual growth, it was like, I want to be more joyous. So then I'd focus on joy. It's like a one channel effect. And like maybe I do like 30 days of joy or 30 days of compassion. That's not a negative thing. That's definitely a good way to go. Gets you still gets you to the same place. I'm just saying that instead, if I allow myself to feel the all, well, joy is maturing, compassion is maturing, grace is maturing, grief is maturing. Every one of them is maturing together. Now, the wonkiness, in my opinion, and what I've could have deduced so far is because they're still imbalanced and the polarizations are imbalancing themselves back out. The wonkiness is that safety that you're going to be okay with all of them working together. That wonkiness, that feeling of unsafety is because you have built so many safety frameworks around being fractured that when you start to bring all these parts together, it feels really strange and wonky to start working with all of them as one rather than just one part of yourself making one decision. This is because I'm working on confidence. And I will tell you guys, for me, it's been really rewarding to be able to say, this process has helped me with patience and centeredness and balance and the ways it's affected my body. And like my processes I'm able to speak about them with more depth because there's literally more depth of my being there for it. And so that's been really rewarding to even be able to hear myself speak these things. But I can tell you guys, when I first started this process, I was like, "Ooh, it brought up a lot of limitations, a lot of challenges in my life came vastly forward very quickly." Why? Because the fractured networks or structures that I had built around, we literally create frameworks to stay fractured. When you invite those fractured portions to no longer even have to have a framework, we're all just sitting at a really open table. Where's the safety? Where's the structure? Your presence with it is the structure. Your presence is the safety. So I hope that makes sense. If anyone has any questions, at least on or maybe like a situation we could talk about or anything at all, please feel free. Once again, thank you guys for listening to it. I hope that was digestible.
Yeah, no, it's a lot to take in, Michael. But what I hear you saying, and I so appreciate it, is what you resist persists. So if we make ourselves wrong, right? I really hear you saying that. If we say, you know what, this part of myself is just bad, it's wrong. I need to be in these higher vibrations of joy, gratitude, love. Then what we resist is really persisting. And when you say frameworks, what I hear you saying is stories, context, contextual, the contextual framework that makes up this expression is saying, no, that is wrong. And so really what we're doing is we're focusing on resisting something and we're really lying to ourselves saying that we're in these higher vibrations of being expressed with gratitude, love and light, right? Like that's like the new agey thing, right? And so really we are in essence fractured and really not balanced. We're imbalanced. We're off kilter. So I love what you're saying is all options on the table. There's no way to be. Acknowledge what we are. We can transmute those lower, heavier, like you call it, battery energies, lower vibrations, and create a channel to with compassion. This is one thing I've been saying and that I realized in being in relationships, and I feel like it's a space that um, when we're like let's say in a romantic relationship, we create a safe space with our partner for communication and understanding. But we really start doing that with ourselves before we do it with anything else, places or things. So we create that safe space with compassion, and we're able to look at ourselves, accept every aspect of ourselves, and then transmute that, with love and compassion to something better, or like people say, reparent ourselves, those younger traumatized versions of ourselves, because there's so many aspects that are, like you said, that are fractalized that really make up our identity, I feel, right? Like we don't even know how to be without those parts of without those victim stories or what have you. And that's okay
Exactly.
too. But I love the awareness you're bringing to this call. I love the
Thank you.
acceptance and embrace of all our expressions. Looks like Mila has her hand up. Mila, go ahead.
I wanted to uh, I wanted to first of all thank you for your input. Is it Michael? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
And it was a deeply resonating um, encounter of almost a mirror of something similar that I've been feeling and going through. I also have been in a journey where I also needed to start by doing the one subject, um, dip in the pool of healing and, needed to deal with my anger. And most recently, I should also support this by saying that I'm also a student of astrology. So there's a almost a mirroring happening with the fact of the vocabulary you use with the fractalization and the deconstruction piece, which is happening now. We just are leaving Capricorn, which is about structures, and we're going into Aquarius. The planet Pluto is going into Aquarius, which is a transformation of the community. And there's more spaciousness, there's more airiness, meaning more mental, more thinking of what does transformation mean and how does it look like? What does it look like? I can simply say that what you're saying is reminding me that I I'm always going to be a work in progress, and to think that we always are going to reach a pinnacle like the old paradigm. I don't believe that that's personally that is something that will be helpful for people or for the collective people, um, who need to seriously look at, and this is where I'm coming from. I'm someone who was invested in this information, in getting into a healing space for myself, for my family, for my dealing with generational trauma. But there are many people who are not ready, who do not know how to enter into these spaces. But I truly believe those that are already in it, we somehow need, we're the linchpin, so to speak. We're somewhat of the catalyst. So I'm curious from your perspective, or anybody who has a sense of this, if that's happening, or personally, as we're moving through this time period, Mars happens to be across from Pluto. That is men, or the assertive energy, male energy, action energy is opposing people, the idea or the concept of power and the concept of transformation. And today I went to my very first acting class. Well, and that's Leo in the 12th house. People don't see that part of me, but we need to step into places and spaces that we fear, and it's not comfortable, but that is where I think the medicine is, and it's going to be different for every person, but that's just an example. So yes, I ask that question regarding what is your sense of how how and where, and what does it look like for us to bring some of that medicine, or
Yeah, that's a
challenge, maybe, I don't know. So thank
yeah,
you.
for sure. For sure. I would love to comment on that real quick. I think what I understand about the basic maybe energetic framework of the universe so far is that I feel very much so that there's a lot of resonances that we maybe could somewhat categorize into the feminine. There's a lot of emotional things that happened, and I'm not saying masculine or feminine in terms of like the body and all of the ego type things. I'm saying if we're just put in two different categories, there's a lot of resonances, a lot of energies. And then I feel like there's the structures, like we've been speaking of. Now, what I understand is that the structure is literally just built off of agreements. It's just an agreement between parts. So like if we talk about like, oh, I'm gonna, like we said earlier, or like you just mentioned, I've got to step into the fear. Well, I have to make an agreement with myself to do that. I'm gonna do that. Maybe it's not so mental or verbal, or you're not really talking to yourself, but it is an agreement at its base energy standards. So when you asked how do we bring this medicine and where, I feel like what we're all doing here is we're all bringing ourselves back home, you know, for ourselves. We are becoming the home for ourselves. And I feel like one of the greatest tools that I've ever been given was actually by a very wise elder woman in Peru named Maria Paza. And she said, invite all of the versions of yourself in, literally just to all aspects, to all versions of me, to all of my different perspectives, beliefs, all of my different ages, all of the lifetimes I've lived, all of my dimensional layers. Literally, she just kept going and going and going and going on like how you could talk about bringing all of you in. And then you just ask, can we all make an agreement to work together? Sounds simple, but in and of its essence, it's exactly what we're speaking of, is taking all those structures that have been pushing us away from stepping into the things that may be uncomfortable, because the structure is saying no, and the part that's being safeguarded by the structure is saying no. So then if we just invite them all in, even the structures, and we say, can we all work together? Oh, that completely changed my existence. Especially being told this by a woman that was struck by lightning 3 times by the age of 12. You know, she was, I mean, this woman was so much power just in and of her presence, and she just made everything so simple. Can I take all of the parts of myself and just have an agreement that we're going to work together? I'm no longer going to leave the parts of myself behind. I'm not going to say one is better than the other. I'm just going to actually try and make as much of me make the decisions as possible. So instead of me standing on a foundation that this is what I should be making the choice from, I should be patient. Actually, patience and all the parts. And that is from an agreement. And so the one thing I would offer here, if, you know, as bringing this to people, is that if anyone that you know could benefit from finding home within themselves, I think that it comes down to being able to set an agreement with yourself. And from that moment, you always know what that yes felt like. Bringing all the parts of yourself together. They might say no at first as well, which is totally okay. But then you just keep bringing them together until they feel safe enough to say yes. But when you get that yes will resonate for the rest of every other thing you build from there on out, because no part feels that they need to say no anymore. They can move forward. That opened my floodgates. I'm going to tell you right now, I was already on a spiritual journey. That agreement and that yes, that everything started to flow. So that's like a simple tool that I offer to people is hey, do you feel like you're all over the place? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just try something simple. Can we sit down and breathe for a minute and just ask for all the parts of ourselves? What do you mean by that? All the parts of me. Well, okay, let's try this. What are you feeling right now? Anxious. Okay. What else are you feeling? My feet. Okay. What else? A little tired. Okay, good. Now let's feel anxious, tired, and feet all together. That's just parts of yourself. Are all 3 of them willing to work together? Can we just like feel those 3 feelings? Are they willing to move forward into the next step? They might even say no, but that's okay. You just keep working until the safety of a yes comes forward. And when you feel that foundation of a yes inside of yourself, that you will all work together, then no matter what happens from that place, I'm going to tell you guys this right now. I've had many, many times of doing this, and there has been many outcomes from making the decisions of all of the parts of myself coming together, that the outcomes seem to my previous structures as not what we wanted, right? That is, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening type of outcomes. But you know, the feeling that's even behind all that, like, I can't believe this is happening, but At least we did it as much as us as possible. Wow. At least we love and accepted ourselves as much as possible to make this decision. Even the outcome still is already permeated with love and acceptance for each part. So no matter what's happening in your life, at least you did it as whole and complete as you could. At least you did it as much of you as you could. And then what you start to realize is that actually, guys, no matter the outcome, the real outcome you're looking for is the most amount of you possible. And I honestly, I learned that from Maria, because she told me about the times when she, at least in their spiritual journey, and they, at a certain level, will completely surrender themselves to divine channeling. And most of them talk about it as like going completely nuts, where like they'll wake up and like the channel that they just got is to like go buy this shoe, only the left shoe, and then like deliver it to like this place. But while they're like walking with the shoe, the amount of channeling and energy that they're putting into this left shoe, and then they go and deliver it, and there's this little girl that is missing just her left shoe, but like 3 cities apart, and they walked. And it looks like it's crazy. And it's like, how did you know she needed the shoe? It's because they surrendered themselves into that. But that place, she talked about it, like they're all of her parts were working together always. And then she upgraded even one more part, which was like, okay, let's say to the divine codex maybe, or like the beings that are able to see everything, because they're just in that maybe ascended state and they're just up there. What is the best all options at the table for all of them? What is all of their options on the table for humanity? What does that look like? And that's what they were channeling. So this is like how I could deduce what she was speaking to me about from even a more expanded essence. And I really do feel that it comes from that agreement. She spoke about that agreement so many times, bringing all of the parts of yourself together so that you feel safe to make the decision you're making. You feel confident in the decision that you're making, not because it's any one type of decision, but because it's the most amount of you doing it. And who can argue with that? Really nobody. Even if they tell you it's wrong, even if they tell you it's right, whether the outcomes were desired or not, you can work on fine tuning the agreements so that the outcomes come better. They channel easier. They manifest more clearly. All of those things come with time, but at least you did it as most you.
I love it, Michael. The awareness
Thank
you're
you, buddy.
bringing is like that's fire. One beautiful point right after another. Again, going back to our authenticity, right? I really feel that that's what you keep going back to, and not measuring it. That's what I hear you saying over and over again. Release the judgment. What does judgment do, really, right? Does it make us feel good? Let's lower the bar. I mean, we're human. Let's accept all parts of ourselves, is really what I hear you saying. Let's release the judgment. Let's create space with compassion to allow all our expression to come forth. There's nowhere to be, there's no measuring stick being applied other than the ones that we apply ourselves. Can we all agree that we are the ones that cause the greatest suffering to ourselves? It's no one else. No one can make us feel any particular way. Only we can make ourselves feel any particular way. So I so appreciate this. We have about 11 more minutes. Is there any other comments, any questions, anything else? This would be the time to bring your questions. I know we have some people, we have about 7 people on Facebook Live. I would invite you to maybe write your questions out, and we can look at those and respond to those. For those of you on Facebook Live as well, I'm looking on there, or anyone here on Zoom, feel free to raise your hand or start talking.
Well, while we're waiting for somebody, and please interrupt me at any point, you actually just shared something that also gave me one final point. If we make that agreement with ourselves to move forward as much as possible as us, then what happens is that we start to, like Noe just said, we start to lower the bar, because actually the bar that we've set so far is based on all those structures. The bar the judgments that we have for ourselves are coming from the places that are attached to getting away from what we haven't given space to. So, like, I have this bar that I should be the most patient person in the world because I really don't like my anxiety. So even the bar is wasted up here. If we just drop the bar entirely to how much of you was there to make that decision, and it's not even a percentage. It's just how many parts can you speak about made that decision. You will notice that if you can bring in more parts, the decision in and of itself has more flesh, it has more body, it has more depth, it has more emotional content, it has more ability to symbolically orient itself, it has more magical channels. Why? Because you brought more channels into it, you brought more spaces of yourself into it. So yeah, set the bar super low. Guys, if you have a decision in your life that's really big right now, I try this on for size, I promise. Do not make the decision until all of the parts of yourselves that you can gather as much as you can, and you feel a full resounding yes, we can work together. Don't even what type of working together yet. Nope. Turn it back to step one. Do all of the parts of myself agree to work together on this decision? Until you get that yes, don't do it. Don't. Don't.
Michael, I
Just
have a
literally
question.
don't.
I have a
Yeah,
question. I think it'll be beneficial. Maybe if you expand upon it, how would you suggest for our audience to really like be able to source out all these different parts of ourselves and bring those together? Like, is there like an exercise or something practical that maybe you can suggest for everybody here that they can start practicing right after this call?
totally. Totally. I will try it right now. We'll do it as a grounding meditation right now. Okay. So what I would like you to do is close your eyes just like we did at the beginning. And if you're driving, please don't do that. But what you're gonna do is just ask yourself, what are some emotions I've felt today? Go through some of your experiences, and what are the emotions that you start to feel? So when you find an emotion, where do you feel that in your body? Where? Where is it somatically strong enough? Where is its energy most located? Good. Now, instead of having to change where it's located or change it at all, add up literally. Don't just say thank you for being here. Please continue to stay with me. Now go to one other section of yourself, go to another memory, and keep feeling that part of your body. Keep feeling that emotion, keep feeling that thing. Now go to another memory. What did I feel in that situation? Oh, okay, where is that located? It's okay if they overlap a little bit. It's okay if they're in separate sections. It's all of that is okay, but you're using the anchor of your body to anchor these parts of yourself. They're already anchored there, friends. They're already anchored there. You're just bringing your awareness to where they are anchored, and your body is already holding space for them. So connect that conscious awareness to where each of them is anchored, and then you just keep piecing them together. You might get to a certain capacity where you have so many parts that it's hard to hold on to them and remember which each part was and what its emotional stasis is, and all that's fine. But what I would suggest is just this simple exercise. What did I feel earlier? Oh, okay, good. Yeah, you're right there. Good. And if you need to listen to it for a little bit, what does it bring up? What thoughts does it bring up? That's okay. You can give it as much space as you want and then move on to the next one. Now, you can also do this in any situation that's happening just off the bat. Like we were talking about earlier, I get cut off in traffic. Okay, where am I feeling what am I feeling? Frustration? Where is that located in my body? And when you isolate it into that part inside of my body, well, then it opens up the rest of the space to show you what other things you're feeling rather than frustration just being like a full blanket. So you just find these parts of yourself and you just keep thanking them. Thank you. What do you have to say to me? It might just be a feeling, friends. Sometimes it doesn't even have a voice yet. Sometimes it just needs space to be felt. It might not even start talking. It might not even produce thoughts. It might not even produce memories. But that's okay. You just hold it with you in your body. And then when you give it enough space to where it feels like it's got the space, and again, I cannot tell you what that feels like for you. But what I can tell you is you'll know when you get there. You'll know what it feels like to be with that part of yourself rather than trying to be either at that part of yourself or that part of yourself coming at you. When it feels like it's there with you. that it's completely okay for you to feel that with your body, then you know you can move on to the next one. And you know you can move on to the next one. And you might only be able to do one. But guess what, friends? That's actually two parts. That's your observative, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, eternalness, if we want to call it that. And then that other part that we just felt. That's two parts. Whereas before it might have just felt like that part that's now showing up. And then what I do is that once I feel all these parts coming together, then make an agreement with them. Hey guys, can we start working together? Can we really love and accept each other? And can we move together? They might say no. That's okay. If they say no, if you get a feeling of sinking feeling or like oh, that doesn't feel okay yet, that's all right. Then you just feel that too. Accept that. And then you just allow it to move forward. Okay. Wow, that feels great. Even moving into the acceptance of the part that's saying no, that part needs space. And you might be like, well, Michael, when do I stop? Well, all I can tell you is, friends, is that Mila said it earlier. It's never going to stop. But you can definitely choose to say, okay, we've agreed to move forward, or right now we're not moving to agree to move forward, but at least we were together. Thanks for being together. I love you. Or thanks for moving forward. Let's move forward now. What are we going to do in this moment? And when all of those parts are equal and together and moving forward, then the decision will come from your intuition, a much more balanced intuition, a much more centered space that allows the decision that is best for you and all parts of you to flow forward. I really do believe that that comes from us channeling our highest essence, and that comes from us being the most present.
Thank you, Michael. What a practical tool. When we did that exercise, I felt my throat. I wonder what everybody else felt, but it's so practical. Our
Yeah,
body is keeping the score. It's already holding space.
Exactly, brother. And once we bring our awareness to where it is holding the space, and then they start to work together. And I will say this too. I learned the difference actually studying with different shamanic cultures from Peru to Costa Rica to Colombia. I will tell you that the Colombians, they're all about, instead of you processing the roots, like just going into the roots and tearing it all apart and finding all the belief patterns, and they're very much about like, find one thing that emotion has to say and then keep feeling it, but it's already gotten to speak. It's gotten to speak, allow it to be felt, allow it to be just as present as everything else. I feel a lot of the awareness, the wisdom that comes from these emotional pits, when they're given space, we don't have to dive into them because they've been given the space to just express it anyway. So instead of us having to go into these massive analytical sessions like therapy or things that we have to dive into like the core of it and get really deep into it right off the bat, if you give it enough space, its core might just crack right open and tell you what it is. And it might even come softer than if you dived into it.
I love that approach. It goes back to creating a safe space within yourself. Allow yourself to feel everything, to acknowledge it, to that loving kindness awareness that you're talking about.
100%, brother.
What great advice. We're so lucky to have you here, brother. So much wisdom and so practical. So practical. So if you have to recap, what is that one thing or those one or 2 points that you think our audience would benefit from taking home? By the way, this meditation I think is perfect. Such a practical tool.
The 1 or 2 points that I would make for you, friends, is that if you start today with making decisions not based on any belief or any way to feel, but rather the amount of you can do it as, the most amount of you that you can bring together and make a decision, I promise you that is more you than just one part of you. I can promise you that just based on the words that are there. But I'm telling you right now, if you stop making decisions based on wanting to feel some type of way and starting to feel all the types of ways in every moment as much as you can, you'll start to realize that you're making a lot of decisions as well that are based on wanting to feel some way and not wanting to feel another way. Where if we can actually just, what we want to feel and what we don't want to feel are equal. They're all options on the table. They're just as good as the next. And what we start to realize is that that space, that cultivation, that pure presence is the safe space we've been looking for with all of those emotions, maybe with these types of therapies, maybe with these attachments, these dependencies, or I go to this type of person in my life for my relationships. When actually what you'll start to get to is that the decision will not be made unless all parts of you agree to it. And friends, that's your timing, that's your divinity, that's your sovereign essence, that's your ability to be free as you want to be. But it's only coming from all parts of you agreeing to do so. And it will always move forward from you remembering, no matter what, you might, again, the outcomes might come crashing down and it might feel like everything's getting into Chaosville. But at least you would be able to go to the people that are maybe part of that experience and say, hey guys, I know this isn't the most ideal of circumstances, but I just want to let you know that I did this as the most authentic version of myself I ever have. And the people that are in your life that really love you are going to take that. Hey, yeah, these circumstances are a little gnarly, but at least you did it loving you. At least you did it with as much you as possible.
I love that. I totally love that. I feel like we're these masterpiece, these paintings, and to have a masterpiece, you need a contrast of colors. Just like there's a night, you don't appreciate the night without the day. So it is with us. It's a contrast of colors, shapes, and forms. And so appreciating all parts of ourselves. It's not just one bland, white, love and light. No, there's so much. So much. We could talk for days about that. We have talked extensively today. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, brother.
But I would like to close it out with just a even shorter meditation, just to get us back into a beautiful space. Again, the intention here is healing, and I love today what the topic was: incorporating our most authentic expressions in making decisions and in doing life, and appreciating and not judging ourselves for whatever comes up, and holding space with compassion for all parts of ourselves. So how beautiful of a discussion. Thank you, Michael, again. Thank you. Thank you. So again, if you're driving, do not close your eyes, but I invite you, if you are in a safe space, to close your eyes. So close your eyes and take a deep breath and breathe in suffering and hold it and release the breath and breathe out loving kindness to yourself, to your family, to everyone. And just like that, thank you so much. I invite you to open your eyes and appreciate everybody that was here on the call, on Facebook Live, and here on Zoom. And thank you, Michael, again.
Thank you, brother.
Until next time.
Till next time.
Love you guys.